Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. Today I'm honored to have the one and only Karl Smith. Who's Karl Smith? The founder and publisher of Voter Education Project. Before we get started, Karl, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an electrical computer engineer. I've been selling something ever since I was probably about 3 years old now, maybe 7 or 8 years old, actually. And just following politics for a long time, small business owner, background in artificial intelligence, and studied just a wide range of things. So I'm all over the map in terms of my background.
You know, it's kind of interesting, Karl, because here it is, you are an engineer. You're doing politics in that you're trying to move the political education forward. Here I am, a mechanical engineer, doing somewhat of the same thing. Is there something with engineering that we are seeing a particular kind of politics that requires some engineers to get involved?
Well, we understand technology and where things are going and the potential of things, but also we're trained at breaking down complex problems and modeling and figuring out, what are the most important factors and what's going wrong, and divide and conquer. Take a complex problem and look at it from a bunch of different perspectives, find out where the major impacts are, and then put solutions together and put those things back. And then also we have to sell those ideas to management or other companies or whatever. So we're about presenting that material.
So in effect, I think what you're saying is that we need sort of engineers to kind of do what engineers have always done. The scientists do all those things we know they do, and we actually make it useful for humanity.
Well, it's certainly another piece of the puzzle. It's not that we can do everything, and stuff. We need lots of different types of people, but certainly like in the House, you want some engineers, you want some lawyers, you want some teachers, you want some, just the whole range. But, we understand kind of where a lot of the technologies, like some of the new materials that have come down since the 2000s, they're going to have tremendous impacts, into the future. And, a lot of them positive, but you also want to, manage those things. So there could be some problems too.
Absolutely. So now, okay, let's talk about Voter Education Project. What's the genesis of that? Why did you really figure, well, I need to start having an impact in the debate?
Well, like I said earlier, I've been selling since I was pretty small. And what I've seen is that Democrats, they have a good product. They have a really good product. They understand what people need to thrive and what our businesses also need to thrive in our economy and stuff. And they support those things. But they haven't really sold it well. They've sold it to the people that understand that, that when you help others, it helps everybody. But not to the people that are just on the economics and they've been kind of taught that the GOP has been messaging that government can't do anything right, that we just need to give more money to the job creators, and that sounds like it makes sense, and get government out of the way and all that. So what we need to do is show people how that actually doesn't work, and how when we invest in what our people and our businesses need to thrive, they do. And so
I want to stop here a second there because we, even the way you are coming over right now, there's something that I want to make clear to our listeners. Too many times we abstract government. In other words, as if government is something out there and not us. Before you continue, as far as the difference between, let's say, Democrats and Republicans and what we believe in the economic system, why is it that we also have to change people's impressions of what they've been told government is? Because my contention is, let's stop looking at government as some third entity. Government is just a composite representation of us all.
Right. And a lot of stuff that we do and we take for granted wouldn't exist without government. It's us together deciding what is property, what is, the rules in which banking can even occur, or even corporations can even exist, and businesses and all of that. So without government, businesses don't create the necessary conditions for them to exist, either in policy, or in what I call our basic public investments. They need healthy and educated people. They need infrastructure. They need, research and safe communities and so on. So there's a set of things that they don't do. They don't create themselves individually that they need to exist. And they also need rules that allow them to actually sell things in other places. I mean, none of this stuff would exist, without government. And to say that, that government can't do anything right is to just ignore the tremendous economy that we have created by these investments and by having a rule system that allows these things to exist. We're the most powerful economy, in the world. That didn't occur accidentally. That occurred because people understood, or leaders understood in the past, that when we invested, when we created infrastructure, the highway system, when we created our health system, our um, you know uh, educational system, and all of our safety nets, and all of those things, and Democrats and Republicans, did supported those things in the past, and we need to get back to that, and then we can really become the economy that we have the potential of. We're just the tip of the iceberg of what we really could be.
And that's a perfect segue into your description. I think you sent out a newsletter recently titled "Rigged versus Enabled Capitalism," where I think it presents I think that one article presents the learning head of your the new publishing network that you're putting together by starting by that being one of your starting articles, not necessarily your starting article, but one of the most important ones that you've written thus far. I think it presents the case that's going to be most riddling this election cycle, where we're going to be talking about capitalism and the Republicans trying to refer to Democrats as socialists with a pejorative. So why don't you kind of tell us about rigged versus enabled capitalism?
Well, and basically it gets into what I'm calling, the GOP's capitalism. I think we all need to say that. Every time we talk about their economics, we need to say the
Republican
GOP's
capitalism.
economics, yeah, the Republican economics, whatever. And then we need to say, the Democrats, capitalism. That's a different. It's not that Democrats are socialists. Socialism is nationalization of our industries. It's public ownership of all of our businesses, taking your business away, taking your property away and stuff. Democrats are not socialists, period. We need, I don't know, the Democrats, it kind of, throws it back on their feet. They've been called, well, democratic socialism and stuff. But, these countries that are called that, they're barely social. They have few little socialist, socialism things, enough to enable their capitalism, basically. And so we need a little bit of that, but it's basically that the vast majority of it is capitalism. And so Democrats are capitalists, and Republicans are capitalists, and it's just a matter of what flavor of capitalism. So the Republicans have rigged capitalism to mostly work, or primarily work for the rich and entitled, and all of that. Whereas the Democrats, they actually have a brand or a flavor of capitalism that works for everybody. And if we just get the GOP out of the way, it's not getting government out of the way, it's getting the GOP out of the way, we would actually support livable wages for everybody. We would value all of our workers. That's equal work or equal pay for equal work. That's workers' rights, and that's a livable minimum wage. And that's not just good for those people. It's good for the economy. It's creating customers with money. And guess what? Businesses need and want. They want more customers with money. And what do they do when they have more customers with money? They hire and expand, which creates more customers with money and more tax revenues. These things create these things are kind of the smart way of doing things versus the dumb way of doing things. Just giving money to the top, giving money to the rich, big businesses, expecting it to trickle down. But that doesn't actually speed up the economy, because if you have a whole bunch of money, you don't want to lose it. You're risk averse. Also, you don't have a lot of immediate needs. so you don't spend quickly. So does that speed up investing? That would mean that you would invest slowly, you would spend slowly. Does that speed up the economy? No. So that's why. And then the third part of why trickle down doesn't work is if you have a business and if you're basically already hiring, or expanding your hiring, you're buying new things, the tax rate on that, over time, or either now or over time, is zero. Those are expenses of the company. So a lower income tax rate is actually an incentive to take money out of the company versus leave it in the company. So for those three reasons, that's the reason behind why trickle down doesn't work. And then when you hear Democrats say, "Oh, we think that that trickle down doesn't work,"
Let me
that
let me ask you. Let me stop you a second because you pointed out three things and you explained them in detail. Give me three punch lines why trickle down doesn't work. Here's what I mean. There are three reasons that you just gave there, right? And one of the things that we've always discussed is that we are not bullet pointish. We go out and we talk in paragraphs. The GOP speaks in bullet points. You just mentioned three bullet points why, with a lot of explanations, why trickle down doesn't work. Tell me in three bullet points why trickle down doesn't work.
Okay, so basically, you're risk adverse, and that means that you invest slowly. You're going to change if if you put a person with a lot of money, or you have to get more money, you actually invest slowly. You're going to look at a lot of different deals.
Bullet
Okay,
point two.
point two is that you don't have a lot of immediate needs, or you tend not. People that have a lot of money tend not to have a lot of immediate
Bullet
needs.
point three.
Bullet point three is that basically, if you're hiring, if you hire and expand, those are zero. The tax rates are zero,
Okay,
and,
and you see,
and so it's actually a lower tax rate, or lower income tax rate, is actually incentive to take money out of a
out of
company
the company.
versus leaving it in.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we have to do, Carl and I'm pretty sure that you're going to get that eventually on your on your site, is to do just that. Have those bullet points, easy to remember points that people can shoot off. The thing about it is that progressives normally feel a responsibility to give the point and explain what it means because we want you to understand. GOP gives you bullet points and wants you to accept it on faith. And guess what? Because of the fortitude with which they tell their story, people do accept it as fact. And you would go to a coffee house and they would repeat exactly those bullet points, and then you sit back and you let them talk, and you then say, "Okay, could you please explain it to me, teach me?" And at the point that they start to teach you is the point that you get in and, in effect, reverse the teaching process. So
Well,
go ahead.
and the bullet points. I mean, those are just little ways of kind of little concise ways of talking about something. But basically, it's not that the GOP only has bullet points. They actually have a lot of explanation and so on. And then, but once people understand kind of the background of those, then they can talk in this shorthand. And we do it as engineers. Doctors do it in their own area. We all do this, but also in kind of just out in kind of voter land and so on. There's kind of a shorthand that's out there. And so when people say, well, trickle down, or we're going to cut taxes, then people, or the Democrats or Republicans, that's they understand what that means, so they can talk in shorthand. And so what we need to do is do the same things. We need to have full arguments, but also those little shorthand ways of
But Carl,
things.
Here's my issue sometimes with Democrats. You just made three important bullet points about trickle down, where you explain trickle down economics and why it does not work. You did that.
Right.
However, when a Republican goes out and sells trickle down economics, they don't describe it the way you describe it, and therefore it's accepted as something that works.
Right. So so on the website, though, there's fundamental areas, or as a fundamental area, which basically explains and gives the bullet points and so on. Basically, there's bullet point forms of this stuff. There's also more explained documents and so on, because it's not it's not that we need to understand just the bullet points, but we need to understand the background for it. But then we can, once people understand that trickle down doesn't work, then trickle down will become a toxic thing. And no matter how loudly, how much money that they put behind that messaging, it's that it'll fall on deaf ears. And once people understand, how bottom-up economics actually works, then we won't have to justify, spending more on education, spending more on health, spending more on infrastructure and research and so on. We'll understand that these are investments that actually end up creating a profit, for taxpayers. They create and save more tax revenue than they cost. Once those basic principles are we're not going to have to, or understood, that we're not going to have to justify, well, how are you going to pay for that? It's more of a question of how you're going to kickstart it, because they pay for themselves, over time. So basically, anyway, that we just need to get people out, knowing more about how this stuff works in a model that's not a highly technical rocket science or macroeconomics and microeconomics terms. It's just into more of a basic, and that's what we as engineers do, is we create models. So I've created a simple model for people to understand the fundamentals of our economy.
No, you have a concept that in sort of expanded when we in your article. You have a concept called Enlightened Capitalism. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's not my concept. It's basically I was working on what enables capitalism and looking and also enabled capitalism. That sounds kind of enlightened, and then I actually started looking more out there. John Montgomery and others have been working the B Corps. They've been working on benefit corporations. Getting businesses. And like Whole Foods is a benefit corporation. There's 5,000 plus whatever corporations out there now that are benefit corporations, and these corporations are actually looking at not only returning a good profit to the shareholders, but also looking at all the other stakeholders, the shareholders, the employees, the community, the environment, and so on, and giving them processes in which they can be judged on these things. So we need for really sustainable, for capitalism to work in the long run, and for all of us, we need corporations to be responsible and not just take all the pension money just because there's some loophole or some technicality where they can. And if they're only trying to maximize the return for for the shareholders, they're kind of required to go off and do these things that are not good in the long run for the businesses, for the economy, for capitalism. And so we need to turn these things around. There's the benefit corporations. There's an investment group that's more concerned about the direction of the current capitalism, where that's going, because they want it to work for the long run, not just the short run. So Robert Reich, in his book, Saving Capitalism, goes through a lot of the kind of shenanigans, the way the Republicans are rigging the system to work mostly for the few. It works a little bit for the rest of us, but mostly it's just creating a lot of income inequality and all of that.
I want to stop you for a second, because as earlier we we're talking about capitalism versus socialism. Earlier we we're talking about whether what really is capitalism and what is really socialism. I think the current definition of socialism that I see in a dictionary, in our parlance, I think it's actually wrong. Okay, I mean, you explained the definition you gave is a definition in the dictionary. I think that definition is wrong. But the reason I'm bringing back to this point here is you just mentioned about rigged and what Reich had to say. I read his book as well, and what I think is interesting is I don't know that in the current system that we have right now, if the lobbyists for the corporations and the corporations proper or not really just fulfilling their duty. Given that we've called what the corporation, the intent, or what the leaders of a corporation are supposed to do is maximize. They have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholder, which means shareholders, which mean that it is their job to maximize the profits of their shareholders at all costs. So, what is it that they're doing wrong, or what is it that, or is it that what we have to do is really change the definition of capitalism?
Well, and it's just the rules by which they are able to be corporations and so on. And there's the rules are fairly technical, and they have a lot of lawyers to kind of figure out the rules. And the but basically the corporations, if we maybe as as a as states or nation, we could require, for example, all medical associated industry, companies to be benefit corporations or entities, which would mean that they not only have to take in consideration their shareholders, but they also have to take in consideration the patients and the customers, and society and the environment, and all of that. And there's processes. There's third party standards and other things built into these things. So there's ways of making our corporations actually, not just be good for that one corporation for that one moment in time. I mean, sometimes there's a conflict between maximizing profit for the shareholder today, but at the expense of really kind of screwing the shareholders down the line.
Right.
So we really, so who are you really maximizing the profit for? And plus, one corporation's value is not like in isolation. It's in the context of the value of the stock market and all of that. So if you have a lot of corporations that are doing well, not by hurting other corporations, hurting their, if you do too much damage to the system, if you're damaging the system, ultimately all of these things don't do very well.
Right.
And
So,
you damage the environment. Guess what? The corporations or economy is going to be pretty crappy if we don't handle
right.
global warming well. And
Unfortunately, they are not as long-sighted as you are. They are generally very short-sighted,
and
and I
that's
think
our rules. That's the rules.
right.
And we can change those rules, and that's where, like the benefit corporations, that's the kind of thing that they're looking at. It's more that longevity.
Excellent. Well, Carl, in coming to our close, let me ask you a couple of questions. Where do you intend to go from here with your? I mean, I love the one of your first articles here. I see that there are several other articles at your site, which is votereducationproject.com. Again, that site is votereducationproject.com for those of you that are listening on podcasts. It's a site that you should go to. It's a site that you need to share, because if we are going to make the changes that that all of us want to make, that Carl is talking about, we have to start somewhere. So please visit votereducationproject.com. And if you have the wherewithal, don't forget all these things. We need support from all of you. So please make sure to go to votereducationproject.com and read some of the articles, share the articles, and if you have a few pennies to share to help Carl and the project along, please do so. Carl, as far as where you're going with the project, tell us a little bit of, as far as what you intend to do between now and the end of the primaries.
Well, the goal is to change the national discussion to include, terms like, actually people like yourself to start saying the GOP's capitalism, the Democrats' capitalism, and start really differentiating, so we can, get the distraction of, well, Democrats are socialists. No, they're not, so we need to, get it refocused on what the differences between our approaches, are. And so that's, and that gets into kind of the fundamentals. So we get the national discussion to to start talking about how does that work, and how does bottom up economics actually work, or when somebody says, or or getting these things about like our basic public investments, getting people to understand that. So we can actually, we can get candidates to start talking about our basic public investments. We can get candidates to start, saying the GOP's capitalism, the Democrats' capitalism. We can get people like yourself to start talking in that language. It's about creating, the GOP intentionally created some little terms that then they could explain in their own way or whatever, and build up kind of a knowledge base out in the public. And we need to do the same. We need to have those terms at that high level, about our basic public investments, about valuing all of our workers, about sufficient laws and rules and regulations and so on. So that's where we need to go. And if people will watch, also we have a video. If you go to the votereducationproject.com, don't Google on voter education project. There's a bunch of that kind of thing, but there's only one, www.votereducationproject.com. You just go there. There's four main areas. There's fundamentals, there's articles, there's blog, and then there's videos. And if you go to the video link, you'll see the first video that we have up there. Now you can actually subscribe to the channel, the YouTube channel, and then watch the video, and then share that video to others. It's going to come off as not a highly political, polished political ad. It's not. This is it should come off as pretty genuine and a good message and all that. And it's about 6 minutes long, so people hopefully will watch that, subscribe to the channel, forward that on to their friends and coworkers and all of that. So, this is the thing that we need to do, is introduce how this stuff works, instead of, kind of distracting people on things that really don't matter, and not not when we're not getting the big, question right and everything. So,
well, Karl Smith, founder and publisher of Voter Education Project. We know this is going to be a part of the entire project of reclaiming the country for the poor and the middle class. Votereducationproject.com. Votereducationproject.com. Be there. Karl, thank you so kindly for having been here.
Thank you for having me.